Hi everyone, this is Saladin Ahmed. I will just go over a quick introduction basically of Feuerbach's materialism as part of the course Marx's materialism praxis in human emancipation. Feuerbach starts as a student of theology. He moves towards pantheism and Hegelianism, and then a critique of idealism, Hegelianism, and of course also of theology. So he's known for his book, The Essence of Christianity, which was first published in 1841. But before that, he's a student of Hegel. He leaves theology. Basically, he becomes a Hegelian. He attends some of Hegel's lectures enthusiastically. So the story then starts then. But I think to make sense of his philosophical development, it is a good idea to consider this connection. Plato, Christianity, this connection, and then of course Christianity to Hegel. So the idea that truth is originated metaphysically in a world other than the physical world, other than the world of objects, other than the sensible world, goes back to Plato, at least in terms of history of philosophy. Plato, if you have studied any history of philosophy, you should know what we would call in philosophy Plato's metaphysics, and also for Plato, that is the idea that the realm of visibles is not the realm of the higher truth. So what happens there? Let's take a look at his. So that's Plato's so-called divided line, right? So the divided line, this coming directly from the Republic, Plato's book, The Republic. You could think about this side of the line as metaphysics. So metaphysics, what is truth? It's the science of what is truth, or the science that tries to answer that question. And this is more closer to epistemology. How do we know? Epistemology is the science of how do we know. So to Plato, the visible world, the world of things and their shadows, of course, the lowest level of truth is images, reflections, and so on. And Plato, by the way, was not a fan of acting, for example, of theater, because that is less true. The same thing, he has of course the famous allegory of the cave in his book, The Republic, and there the allegory of the cave also you understand why or what is images, what it stands for here. So it is shadows basically in the allegory, or at some point in reflections of objects, say in water. So that's the lowest. Of course, it's true. He would say that's the lowest part or the lowest level of truth. Then you have objects, physical objects, truer, but still it is on the level of what? Of belief and imagination. Well, imagination is, let's forget about that for now. We don't have time to go into that. But imagination, just think about it as like the literal, say, equivalent of images in the what? In terms of knowing. So it is this realm, this side is the side of the, or the realm, or the level of, say, opinions and beliefs. But the level of understanding for Feuerbach is above that, right? So mathematical objects, they don't have, or geometry, they don't have any, say, actual physical existence, but they are truer. And their truth is not dependent on time and space. But even above that is the forms. What are forms? Well, in a way, it is the eternal essence of things. So to Plato, you see a horse, say, you basically, you recollect, your soul recollects the form of a horse. How? Well, Plato, the soul belongs to that eternal realm of the higher truth, where the forms are. And when the soul was there, the soul was in the same realm of the forms of, like everything, forms of horses, and the form of horses, and the form of chairs, and the form of so on and so forth. And that is how you see a horse, your soul simply recollects that knowledge. So the form is that perfect existence of the essence on another level, obviously. So Plato would say there's no such thing as a perfect horse, but every horse has that essence, has that form, or horses have that in common. That's what makes them horses. So anyway, all this to say, the problem of idealism, the assumption that truth, real truth, absolute truth, is in another realm, a realm other than the physical world. This problem of idealism, this kind of thought, starts with Plato, at least if we talk about that in terms of history of philosophy, Western philosophy in particular. And this, of course, is also then taken up by Christianity. And then the connection here with Feuerbach. Feuerbach is, in his early writings, argues that through thinking, we kind of connect to the divine. So thinking is that immortal dimension of being a human. So, in other words, our essence, our truth is not the physical, not the body. So he makes that connection, then thinking, and the absolute, obviously that is coming from Hegel, because for Hegel, all history is a process of the actualization of what? Of the idea with a big I. The actualization of idea. So progressively moves towards that. So in other words, all the physical world is in a way a manifestation of that idea. In other words, idea has more truth, has a higher metaphysical truth than the body, than everything that is physical. Then that is what makes Hegel an idealist to Feuerbach, and Feuerbach will start having a problem with that. But at those early stages, he still thinks religion and philosophy are two paths to same truth, just different ways, and so on. Until 1839, a very important article he wrote called Toward a Critique of Hegel's Philosophy, and we will come across similar topics or titles by Marx later. So Feuerbach goes back to Hegel's metaphysics, phenomenology of the spirit. There, he and logic, also another very important book by Hegel. And Feuerbach, remember, attended some of those lectures also by Hegel. But at this point, Hegel is dead. Hegel died in 1831, and Feuerbach got his PhD in 1828. So you can imagine here, then Feuerbach is about to become a name, and we're talking about the left Hegelians, quite active in the intelligentsia and the Prussian intelligentsia and the universities. So Feuerbach writes this article, and as I said, he goes back to the foundations of Hegel's philosophy. So Hegel talks about this opposition between being and nothingness. Yeah, so this is the very basics, the fundamental level of his dialectics. Being and nothingness, Feuerbach takes issue with this, that you can't, he argues, you can't talk about nothingness. Anything you say about nothingness is just false by definition. It doesn't make any sense. All we can talk about is being. Nothingness is something is something in your imagination, because it is not something. It is, you can't say nothingness is. Whatever you say after that, it is wrong, because you already said it, nothingness is. So you already have the verb to be, then you are committing a fallacy. So this is the problem with Hegel, Feuerbach thought. So this is just another quote from that very interesting article, I think. So he goes on. He has some short, nice sentences in that article. Then he starts his critique of Christian theology very strongly. So he says, it is in the nature of consciousness that it is infinite. And then the problem is that consciousness then falls into this kind of confusion, if you will. That it takes its own infinity for another being. So what Christians did, they kind of attributed this aspect of consciousness to God, to something they called God, and that is basically the problem. So to Feuerbach, then the task is to bring back what is claimed by theology to the study of human beings, to anthropology. He doesn't say it is not important. He does say he does think religion is important, but only as an anthropological question in that literal sense. That infinity, that aspect of the divine, is actually an aspect of the human consciousness. So all this becomes very clear in Feuerbach's book, The Essence of Christianity. Okay. So this is just more on that false dichotomy, being and non-being. he has a footnote even there that he talks about how the Greeks didn't make that mistake. To them, it was truth and falsehood, as opposed to being and non-being. Okay, and so nothingness or not-being exists only in your own imagination, as we were saying. So, again, 1840. So, the 1831, remember, Feuerbach writes that article we're just talking about. 1840, things go down in Prussia in terms of freedom of speech. At that time, Hegelians are quite well known, as I was saying. So also, basically, the state of Prussia starts to go after these Hegelians, these pantheists, and 1841. Again, Feuerbach published The Essence of Christianity, and then published a couple of other works where those manifestos he calls, where he directly criticizes Hegel. So to him, the new philosophy is a materialist philosophy, and that he thinks Hegel actually it should be the end, basically, of idealism. But Hegel was also the philosopher who gave religion another life, basically, through his idealist system. 1845 is when Marx writes the thesis on Feuerbach as notes. He didn't intend to publish those, but he also co-authors the German idealism with Engels, and that's where kind of his critique of Feuerbach takes fuller shape, if you will. 1848, of course, the Communist Manifesto in February, and then you have, of course, then the revolutions. That's when Marx is back in Germany and tries to participate in the revolution. The revolution fails, so, and that's it. He's never back to Germany in that sense. He spends the rest of his life in London, Britain. But also, the Marx, you have to remember, Marx starts as a Feuerbachian and a critic of Hegel. Hegelian, the critic of Hegel, a Feuerbachian materialist, but then he has his critique of Feuerbach, which we'll talk about more. But basically, Marx agrees with Feuerbach very, very strongly, very enthusiastically. Except later, then Marx starts arguing that Feuerbach made this announcement and thought that would be it. Basically, there's a confusion, an intellectual confusion. Feuerbach discovered the problem, and the problem being humans created God or confused an aspect of their own consciousness for some other being, other supernatural being. When in reality, it is human consciousness itself that is supernatural. That's all good. That's something Marx would agree on. But Marx's problem is that Feuerbach's materialism is just too, if you will, removed from the context, the historical and social context. So Feuerbach to Marx is a bourgeois materialist in the sense that, again, Marx would agree with all what Feuerbach said, but except Marx then says then the question is, why did humans create this fiction, this illusion? How? How did that come about? It has a historical ground, historical conditions that led to that. So yes, God is a fiction. Yes, religion is an illusion. But these fictions and illusions are real fictions and illusions in the sense that they have materialist groundings that gave rise to them. So, what are those processes that produced God and religion? That is the real question. The first step is, of course, that God and religion, all this is basically false consciousness. But you can't stop there. That is just the beginning of critique, Marx would say. So that's why Feuerbach is a materialist, a very important materialist, and Marx is a materialist. But yeah, from Marx's point of view, Feuerbach is a bourgeois materialist. Not only that, but also Feuerbach falls into the same idealist fallacy, if you will. How? Remember, in idealism, ideas have more reality. Ideas are the origin of all physical beings, physical existence. You want to correct that, you go out, Feuerbach, you tell people that is the reality. You were wrong. The reality is that there's you, there's your consciousness. The reality is all truth is physical, has a physical origin, has a materialist origin. Okay, good. But what are you doing? You are assuming that by going out there telling people this is the fallacy, you fixed it. So you think the problem is actually intellectually discovered where the confusion is, and then you go out and tell people that and you assume it is over. So here's the idealist fallacy, that you assume the problem is actually it's still an intellectual problem in that sense, like the problem that the philosopher can solve in that sense. Whereas in reality, in order to end the lifespan of those illusions and fictions, of course, Marx later would say not only religion and God, but also the state, a class society, and so on. All these oppressive institutions. In order to put an end to them, what do you need to do? You need to eliminate the conditions of their production, the reality, the circumstances, the social circumstances that lead to the production of these fictions and illusions. That is the Marxist critique. That is the difference. That is Marxist materialism, as opposed to Feuerbachian materialism. And Feuerbach tried to, of course, base everything on senses, empiricism, reason in that sense, as opposed to speculation and the idealist assumptions, other idealist assumptions, which are assumptions even Enlightenment thinkers made. Someone like Descartes goes back to God. The rest, the pantheists, all the way to Spinoza, Leibniz, Feuerbach rightly so makes the claim that even the liberal young Hegelian, left Hegelians who criticized religion, they actually criticized the aspects of religion as opposed to religion as such or Christianity as such. Marx goes further, though. So, as I said to Marx, Feuerbach is a materialist, but falls into the same idealist fallacy, which is the assumption that the problem is basically intellectual. So, in this sense, to Marx, the beginning of critique is always, of course, critique of religion, and you see that in Marx's work, even though he didn't write he didn't dedicate any work to that particular subject, but it comes back continually, and obviously to him it is more than just let's bring back theology to anthropology, as Feuerbach would say. Religion has an existence within a much broader historical and social reality. And once we step out of that pre-human, to Marx, pre-human history, then things like religion, God, and the state, all these things just by themselves, they wither away, they disappear, their time comes to an end. Okay. So back to Feuerbach. So again, intentionally, I thought it's more like that for Feuerbach, it's there's a moment of not only the death of God, but also of Hegel, because he was very enthusiastic about Hegel's idealist system at some point of his life, of Feuerbach's life. So Hegel made the case that Protestantism is the most advanced religion, most rational religion in that sense, and most compatible with modernity. And some of that is true about Christianity as such, and about about Catholics. But he didn't think Catholics, of course, made that kind of advancement in terms of modernity and the religious compatibility with modernity. And of course, he when it comes to Islam, he says, "Oh, those people can't even have an abstraction, like an idea thought in that sense. So far removed." And so, if you are interested in those comments, quite the language is, quite open, straightforward, and quite, you could say that you already sense nationalism there, German nationalism, strongly in Hegel already there. And that would be in the philosophy of history, which was also a series of lectures that were collected and became a book. He gave that course several times on philosophy of history. So he being Hegel now. Okay. So Hegel says Protestantism is the religion of the modern human being. Then Feuerbach, Hegelianism is the new philosophical, mask of that same problematic canon that is religion, and that is basically Feuerbach's departure with Hegel, very deep, and then it becomes deeper. The departure becomes deeper with Feuerbach's manifestos on philosophy and really the rest of his work. So the manifestos. He two manifestos, he wrote them in 1842 and 1843. Okay, this painting is by Ludwig Feuerbach's nephew, Anselm. So it goes back to 1868. It's just there. It's different, than say, Raphael's paintings and so on. I mean, of course, it's not unique in that sense, but an interesting connection line of development, if you will, different realms. Okay, let's move on. This is the second edition of the Essence of Christianity, 1948. That is, remember, also the year of the manifesto. So Marx does criticize Feuerbach a lot. But remember, Marx criticized people he really respected. And also it's easy to forget how important Feuerbach was for Marx's philosophy. And this is just an example of what Marx actually thought about Feuerbach. He thought about Feuerbach as a very important figure in the history of philosophy, but later, much later, Engels basically says that they were all Feuerbachians at that time. Okay. Okay, let's see. Then the essence of Christianity. Feuerbach starts the book basically by making these distinctions that it is in the nature what is essential for a human being is consciousness, and the consciousness is infinite and is capable of problematizing, of questioning infinitely, but also questioning human being, the life of human being. So it becomes, consciousness can turn itself to its own object, and the human to its own object, and can look out indefinitely, and it's outside of our control, our own consciousness. So that's why it could easily be confused for another being, and he thinks that's exactly what happened. And his task is to bring back theology to its origin, which should be anthropology. And then a lot of comments like that for a human being to be is to think, and that is so important, so dominant in human life, that it only makes sense that such a deep confusion took place, and that confusion, that illusion, the confusion resulted in an illusion, and that illusion became so dominant. Okay, well, these are some of his terminology, what happens in the preface, and then the introduction of the book. Of course, the book is, as he explains, is divided into two parts. The critique of theology and religion, but you will see also this coming back later in Marx and Marx's critique of Feuerbach. Okay, so more or less this is what I want to talk about. Also, there were a couple of questions. One about Greeks. So is it true that Greeks didn't have that realm of say idealist realm, that fictional realm? Yes, even though of course they are the Greek gods and so on, the Olympian gods, but it's completely different say, form of divinity, if you will. And Feuerbach, as I think I already said, he acknowledged that Greeks, of course, used some similar notions, but we would be wrong to interpret them in this sense, and in the idealist senses now, even when Greeks talk about gods, for example. In terms of Buddhism, it is my how to put this, at least I argue Buddhism is not a religion. It is perceived as a religion from the point of view of the monotheists. Just like monotheists came to America, and they one of the questions, well, of course, the first question was, where's the gold? And then one of the questions, it's not even a question, they just took it for granted. People have religion. What is these people's religion? It was not even a possibility to the minds of these European colonizers to and thinkers and so on in Europe to say perhaps these people don't have religion. In fact, that's a whole different problem. They did think some people didn't have religion, but in fact they thought those are complete barbarians. They're primitive, because what made people civilized was what to the Europeans was religion, writing, and so on. But religion was a very important aspect of civilization itself. So the way they thought about the Orient is very interesting in those terms. Of course, these people had religion and they had writing and all that, but something happened in their history. They got stuck, and there's an interesting overview of that by Wallerstein in the introduction of, I think, his book on world systems. But the point is, the Westerners, so in this case, the Middle East is included, of course. So these, the Christians and Muslims, they couldn't even assume that there could be people with some form of tradition without a religious concept. And yeah, so I think also the Native Americans, they didn't have. I mean, it's not a terrible thing to say they didn't have religion. It is, religion, certain viruses, diseases, other things, certain crafts. Europeans brought here horses, right? Famously. But it doesn't mean, of course, the Native Americans didn't have their tradition, their systems of knowledge, and so on. The same thing is true for Buddhism. In Buddhism, you don't have that distinction. So Buddhism, of course, it has its own metaphysics. So it is not that they don't have metaphysics. It's not that in Buddhism there are no levels of truth and real truth, like truth, absolute truth. But it is not religion. It is a philosophy, if you will. This problem starts. This idealist problem is characteristic of Western philosophy, and of course of theology. To take it from Christianity all the way to Islam, including all the sects. So that it is important to keep in mind at least some of this when we move to then Marx's critique, because Marx's critique becomes even more revolutionary in the sense that he doesn't go only after theologians, but he goes after an entire system of the production of truth, of knowledge production. Because knowledge is also produced in every society according to the dominant mode of production in that society. And when that mode of production changes, what is assumed in terms of values and truths and aesthetics and morality and so on, all that also will change. And religion is a product of the pre-communist history, of the modes of production that come before communism, if you will. Because the age of communism for Marx is, of course, the age of the communist modes of production, which is also, to say, the age of human emancipation. It's the beginning of the human history, of the end of class society, of that irrational history that is class, so the history of class society. These are the basics, basically we're basically touching upon the main themes and theses in Marx. But this Feuerbachian kind of critique of Hegel is important, will come back, and Marx will build on it. So we will see, let's say, how we will also address the question, I hope, of whether Marx gave enough credit to Feuerbach, because that could be a little confusing, or at least Marxists, do they give enough credit to Feuerbach? Okay, and that's it for the week. Thank you.